Good morning, students. Welcome back. Today we'll discuss short story The Happy Prince. Short story has been written by Irish-born writer Oscar Wilde, who was a novelist, playwright, poet, and critic. He was born on October 16, 1854 and died in 1900. The Happy Prince was a beautiful statue covered with a thin layer of gold. Each of his eyes had a sapphire, and the hilt of his sword was studded with a ruby. The statue had been set up at a high place where from it could see everything. But when alive, the prince knew only happiness. He knew no sorrow at all, as it was not allowed to come near him. As of now, he can see sorrow in those who suffer sorrow. So the prince sacrifices his all layer of gold, the sapphires, and the ruby for the sufferers. In the story, you'll find a swallow comes to pass a night at the statue. Swallows are birds of hot climate. They migrate to hot countries when their native lands have winter. A group of swallows had left for the hot country of Egypt, but one of them had stayed behind for some reason. It had decided to join them after about 6 weeks. The swallow kept flying all the day long, and it was nightfall now. It had reached a city where it saw the statue of a prince. The statue was fixed on a tall column such that it could oversee the entire city. It was getting dark and cold. The swallow decided to pass the night between the feet of the prince statue. The swallow was happy to have a nice shelter to pass the night, but when he was about to close his eyes, a drop of water fell on him. The swallow was amazed. As the sky was quite clear, he was all the more puzzled when two more drops of water fell on him one after the other. The three drops of water were in fact three tears dropped from the eyes of the statue. The swallow was struck dumb to see this and asked the statue who he was. The statue said that he was a prince. When asked why he was weeping, the statue said, "When I was alive, I didn't know any about tears as I lived in total comfort in my palace. But no, I'm dead and stand high above the city, so I can see all the miseries and can't but weep." The prince told the swallow that he saw a sad woman through the window of a small house. She was a seamstress and was embroidering flower on a gown for the royal maid, who would wear it and dance in court. She was sad as her young son was ill and was insisting on having an orange. But she could not buy him an orange. The prince asked the swallow to carry the ruby of his sword to the sad mistress, as he himself could not move. The swallow tried to put up the prince off, saying that he was to reach Egypt and join his group. But in seeing the prince very sad, he could not refuse. He flew over the royal palace and the river, carrying the ruby to this mistress. Laying it on the table, he flew back to the prince, who praised him for the job he had done. The swallow fell asleep and enjoyed a sound sleep till dawn. The swallow got up at daybreak and went over the river for a bath. Then he kept wandering and visiting several places in the city. As the moon rose, he reached the statue and told the prince that he was leaving for Egypt. The prince asked the swallow to stay about night with him and carry one of the two sapphires of his eyes to a playwright. He was so complete to play for the director of a theatre, but he was hungry and shivering with cold for want of money. The prince said that he would sell the sapphire and fulfill his needs of food and firewood. The swallow did as he was told to do and returned to the statue to pass the night. The swallow got up next morning and went to the harbor to watch the sailors at work. He kept roaming by day and at night came to the prince, who asked him to stay another night to carry the other sapphire to the match girl. The little girl had been sent by her father to sell matches, but the matches fell into the gutter. Barefooted in icy cold weather, she was crying for fear of a beating by her father for not bringing the money got from the sale of the matches. Though the weather was getting colder and colder, the swallow would not refuse and did this job as well. The swallow returned to the statue after delivering the sapphire to the little match girl. Seeing the prince blind, he decided to stay with the prince forever. The prince asked him to leave for Egypt, but he wouldn't. He sat on the shoulder of the statue and told the prince strange stories from the strange lands. The prince told the swallow that misery was the strangest of all the things in the world. He asked him to fly over the city and let him know what he saw there. The swallow told him that he had seen the rich making merry, beggars at the city gates, starving children in the streets, and two shivering children who were hounded out from under the bridge to be drenched in the rain in the open. When the swallow told the prince what he had seen in the city, the prince asked him to tear off his gold layer bit by bit and distribute it among the poor. The swallow obeyed the prince. Now the statue looked ugly, as it was made of lead, in fact. The weather had become unbearably cold. The swallow fly, could fly onto the prince's shoulder with difficulty and ask for his leave. He asked the prince to let him kiss his hand. The prince asked the swallow to kiss him on the lips out of love. The swallow did so and fell down dead at the prince's feet. Oh, a loud crack occurred and broke the statue into two parts. Next morning, the mayor of the city came strolling to the square accompanied by other councillors. They were surprised to see the dead bird and the damaged statue that looked like a beggar now. The dead swallow was thrown on a heap of waste. As for the statue, its lead was melted in a furnace and its heart could not be melted in spite of repeated efforts. So it was also thrown on the same heap of waste as the dead swallow. God in paradise was seeing everything from above. He ordered his angels to bring the two most precious things in the city to him. The angels carried the prince's heart and the dead swallow to the Almighty. He smiled and said, "The little swallow shall sing in the garden of paradise, and the happy prince shall praise him in the city of gold." Thank you.